Joining us now, former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance and New York Times correspondent Charlie Savage, the author of Power Wars, the relentless rise of presidential authority and secrecy. Joyce, let's start with you. What do you make of President Trump's conversation with Vladimir Putin in light of everything that has come out with regard to the Mueller report, specifically around Russian interference in the last presidential election? And I'm sorry about all the eye rolling. It is just so hard for me to stomach Sarah Sanders telling reporters what happened today between the president and Vladimir Putin, given we know this woman's track record.
Yeah, she doesn't have a great track record, and it doesn't help her out here. For one thing, there's no readout of this call. And at a minimum, we should see a readout to know what the president and Putin actually discussed. She describes it as very, very briefly talked. I think we're entitled to know the full substance, because the one person who's not cleared in the Mueller report is Vladimir Putin. In Volume 1, Mueller lays out extensively Russian efforts to interfere with our elections. Those are, I think, best classified as a cyber attack on the United States and efforts to manipulate our voting public. So the notion that the president now wants us just to turn the page, and if he in fact continues to accept Putin's insistence that he did nothing wrong, that really is a national scandal and not something that we should let go of.
Charlie, walk us through this. What do you make of the president's conversation with Putin?
Well, this is the latest in a pattern of President trying to move on from 2016, look away from 2016, and governed. And he's been trying to find ways to have partnerships with Putin. Interestingly, though, the situation in Venezuela puts the two countries in each other's face. As the reporter before said, Russia has been backing the Maduro government. The United States is very clearly trying to help topple the Maduro government. And so this is a place where whatever you think about Putin and Trump's history, and the fact that Trump's in office, in part maybe because Putin helped get him there, this is not a place where they're working together. Stephanie.
Joyce, walk us through this. You know, clearly Sarah Sanders wants people to move on. Democrats don't want to. What do Democrats need to do to keep the focus on the Mueller report? Whether it's this spat between Bill Barr or Robert Mueller, that's secondary. Primary is what is inside that report.
The piece that the White House seems to be missing, and President Trump in particular, who said he's not going to put any more witnesses up to Congress because they've already talked to Mueller, what he's missing in that is that there are two different jobs happening here. Bob Mueller was charged with investigating whether or not there had been violation of United States criminal law. Congress has a very different function to carry out, and Congress looks to be intent on moving forward with that oversight function that will help them understand at a minimum whether or not they need to enact new laws to protect against this kind of conduct in the future, but also to engage in full-on oversight to ensure that there is no corruption, that there hasn't been any misconduct. Congress has a separate job to do, and so they need to be firm with the White House, insisting on the separation of powers and that they be permitted to play their role as a check on the executive branch.
All right, Joyce, we know that Democrats have already subpoenaed former White House counsel Don McGahn, and the president is saying, no way, not going to happen. What do you do in that position? Does the president have the right to prevent Don McGahn?
Historically, there's been this notion that...
Sorry, Joyce, to you first.
Historically, Congress and the executive branch have worked together through an accommodation process to try to work out these sorts of views and come up with a compromise that everyone can live with. And in fact, Democrats in the House, at least, have made those offers to the White House and to the Justice Department, trying to suggest that they're willing to take less than a fully unredacted version of the Mueller report, that they're willing to start with certain types of testimony. But the White House seems to be relatively intransigent and insisting that there won't be anything further coming. That could throw this into federal courts. And historically, federal courts have not looked kindly upon parties who don't engage in the accommodation process. The courts have in the past been willing to enforce Congress's ability to get access to materials through subpoena. The real question there is whether the White House's strategy of delay is one that will work in the White House's favor.
Charlie, can invoking executive privilege work in this case for the White House?
Well, it can if their strategy is to run out the clock and prevent any more information from coming out, or even the spectacle of televised hearings at which people like Don McGahn recount what was their interactions with President Trump about matters like trying to have Mueller fired and trying to falsify evidence to cover up that he tried to have Mueller fired. Because even though a court might eventually rule that the White House had waived executive privilege, or the executive branch had, because this material has already been made public in the form of William Barr letting the Mueller report see the light of day, these are things that can be argued over for a very long time. And if the White House appeals losses to the appeals court, to the on-bank appeals court, to the Supreme Court, that can just consume the next 18 months easily. And on top of that, it's very hard for Congress to enforce its subpoena power. It doesn't have the ability to prosecute people that it holds in contempt of Congress. It has to rely on the Justice Department to do that, and the Justice Department has the power of prosecutorial discretion to say, no, we're not going to do that because the president didn't want this person to talk to you. It's a big problem in our system of separation of powers. Republicans hate it when Democrats are in the White House, and now Democrats are having the same problem in not controlling the executive branch.
A system that doesn't seem to work as promised.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.